There's just one big mistake that we're going to talk about that the average American makes. The data is already out there. Everybody kind of knows about it, but most people just kind of ignore this fact when they are in fact making this mistake. And in fact, when we were, the fix though, the good news is the fix to this mistake is pretty simple, although it's mentally and emotionally very difficult because they're so used to doing this thing. When you're in a habit, and even in that habit sometimes is kind of addictive in a sense, it's very, so the solution's simple on paper, it's very hard and mental emotion just because of trying to break that habit is very difficult. This mistake we're talking about is very common, and it's called debt. Thriving in Tandem. It's a podcast for you, the married entrepreneur that wants to win in business and marriage at the same time.
Welcome to Thriving in Tandem.
Welcome back to another episode of Thriving in Tandem.
Hi, Tandem family.
And today we've got a great episode on money, the biggest mistake people make, the average person makes, that's costing you $1 million, if not millions of dollars or more. And we're kind of fresh off of, like we said earlier in the previous episode, about just getting back from our month in Charlotte, the Lake Norman area. And our last day there, we actually gave a financial stewardship workshop. It was a 4-hour workshop at a local church there in Charlotte. And we the title was Power to Create Wealth. And, when the subject of creating wealth comes up, the first thing that's on people's mind is, what should I invest into? Right? What's that thing that's going to be this great big return that's going to make me rich?
Get quick rich schemes.
Yeah, whether it's in crypto or gold or some other, asset, or maybe an insider stock trade tip or whatever, right? Everybody's looking for the big gold pot at the end of the rainbow, something that, and usually, they're looking for speed. And they are not realizing or kind of discounting or ignoring kind of the elephant in the room that's costing them money. And because if you talk to the average person about investing, they'll say, oh, either we don't have money to invest, and either that means they have, zero margin in their spending account, or their, what they call the, after your expenses, your,
I know it's not savings.
No, after your expenses, whatever's left over is your discretionary income, right? People are thinking, I don't have, money to invest, or enough money. Because I think people think, it takes a lot of money to invest to make a lot of money. And so there's this one area that when people say we don't have money to invest, now whether that's literal or they just feel like they don't have enough to invest and to invest what it takes, they're not realizing there's one thing that they're probably doing that is costing the ability to invest properly to make $1 million and be a multimillionaire. And reality is, it doesn't take that much, not say effort, but it's not as difficult as a lot of people think to get to $1 million. But anyways, there's just one big mistake that we're going to talk about that the average American makes. The data is already out there. Everybody kind of knows about it, but most people just kind of ignore this fact when they are in fact making this mistake. And in fact, when we were, the fix though, the good news is the fix to this mistake is pretty simple, although it's mentally and emotionally very difficult because they're so used to doing this thing, right? It's almost a lifelong habit of making this financial mistake. And when you're in a habit of doing something, even though it's not a healthy pattern, it's very difficult to break.
Yeah, it's ingrained in you.
Yeah, smoking, drinking, right? Drugs, whatever, gambling, right? So when you're in a habit, and even in that habit sometimes is kind of addictive in a sense, it's very, so the solution's simple on paper, it's very hard and mental emotion just because of trying to break that habit is very difficult.
Well, yeah, because we get comfortable with the habit, whether it's good or bad. It's something that we're familiar with.
So this mistake we're talking about is very common, and it's called debt, DEBT. It's
And
the
it's
four-letter word
that
that's
nobody
costing.
wants to talk about.
Yeah, it's the four-letter word. Nobody wants to talk about it. No one wants to deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people don't think it's as big a deal as it really is. And so we're going to kind of break this down. And even when we did that workshop, we I kind of purposely designed it so we spent a little bit more time on debt, because I know it's a big issue. And in fact, I remember after the workshop, or even during and after the workshop, during the breaks, people are coming up to us talking about these different debt issues that they have. And then some people almost like they realize it's there, but they don't almost want to deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You have an example?
They rather just have somebody else deal with it. I know one gal said she was in business and the business didn't make it, and she had all this debt. And I said, do you have the money to pay it off? And she said, yes, but she didn't want to take money out of her savings. She wanted somebody else to either give her money to pay it off, or wanted to get a grant, someone else's money, and or possibly get a loan, which is going to be hard to get a business loan if you're already in debt and the business is no longer around.
Get debt to pay off debt.
Yeah.
That's a good one. Yeah.
And so she didn't like my idea of paying it off because she had the money. And then I said, will you be able to save money if you pay that off? And she goes, because she said she wouldn't have a savings after that. And she goes, oh, yeah, I could save $500 a month easily. And I said, well, it's not going to take you long to build back up your savings account again. But I think she wanted somebody else to take care of it for her.
Yeah, they're always looking for a different answer than the one that's just right in front of them, is just take care of it. Man up and take care of it. And otherwise,
especially when you have the money to do it, the means.
Yeah, otherwise, you're stressed to gills with this debt. I mean, it's interesting, the justification of not paying out the debt when you have the money to do it. You have it in savings, but we don't want to pay debt off. And it's it's interesting. Anyways, we'll get into this, but this is the primary reason the average American can't get ahead,
Mm-hmm.
is because they're strapped to the debt. In fact, there's a passage in Proverbs that talks about the rich rule over the poor and the borrower is a slave to the lender. And literally, you don't own anything until you pay off the debt. You don't own your house until you pay off the mortgage. You don't own your car until you pay off the loan. So the reality is, we think we got this and that, we have these assets, but when you carry the debt when you're carrying debt that you don't own it.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have it
until your name is on the deed. You don't own it.
So you're literally working to pay the debt. So you're basically you're in bondage, right? Because if you lose your job, or there's a serious pay cut, right? We get fearful because we got all these bills to pay, including the debt.
Mm-hmm.
But imagine if that debt was gone, that extra relief you might have.
Well, and it's a vicious cycle if you're in debt, because one guy was telling me he had 3 payday loans. And so he wasn't even able to get by from paycheck to paycheck because he had to keep getting another new loan out. And he's like, it's pretty bad when they know you on a first name basis. And then I said, well, you're not going to like what I have to say, because he's asking me for my advice. I said, you need to have a bigger income. That might mean a second job. And he's like, yeah, I realize that. So he was already aware of that, so that he can get on the other side of it, to get out of it, so that he can create new cycles, healthy cycles.
Yeah, I remember helping a friend years ago with marketing. He opened up a payday loan business, and so said, "Oh, sure, I'll help you with the marketing." And then so, I was looking into payday loans and how it operates and all that kind of stuff, and I was like, "Wow, this is kind of sad." I mean, because what I found in my research was the average payday borrower has not just one, but the average is 3 payday loans going at a time, which means they go from one payday loan place to get a loan, and then they go across the street to get another one, and they go down the street to get another one. Because these payday loans, if you're not familiar with them, they're small loans, and they're short-term loans, like basically to bridge the gap between paychecks when you don't have enough. And so usually I think the maximum at the time was like $750 to $1,000 max. But it carried a 25% interest. Like in 2 weeks, You have to pay back with 25% interest. And so think about this. And then when they're, so that, all I'd say is, because there's a cap on how much you can get at any location on a loan, that's why if their debt is bigger than that, that's why they go to multiple locations. So the average borrower carries 3 payday loans at a time. And think about that 25% interest in 2 weeks. This isn't
so
a year.
how do you ever get to the other side of that if you don't increase your income?
If you annualize that out, it's like thousands of percent interest. So yeah, and a lot of them are doing it paycheck to paycheck over and over again, like this guy you're talking about, right? And you think about it, you're like, wow, just in your head, you're like, how do you ever get ahead? Because every time you take out a loan, you're paying back 25%.
And he's so stressed about it. It's sad.
Yeah. And so all that to say is, yeah, you got to break the cycle. The sooner the better, because in this cycle of payday loans, I mean, that debt accumulates really fast, really quick. Or yeah, that's what I said. I just said it twice. That debt accumulates very, very fast. So you got to figure out a way to get ahead of it. So let me break down some data for you on debt, and hopefully you're still listening to us. Hopefully, I was going to say earlier, if you're rolling your eyes about debt, you probably need to listen up, because we will give you a little bit of a solution. But the average consumer debt in the United States is $20,000.
And that's just average.
This is average across the U.S. Now, I was just talking to a young man that I mentor. I had breakfast with him a couple days ago, as you know, honey.
Mm-hmm.
And I was talking about this very subject, and he says, at Mariner, I shouldn't have said the name. At his church, it's a mega church. I don't think it's a big issue because it's public, because they actually did a survey, financial survey of their membership, and one of the questions or survey questions that they're trying to find is what is the debt that you carry, and consumer debt specifically, not counting your home, not counting your mortgage, but consumer debt, cars, credit cards, student loans, those kind of things. The average debt at this church was $120,000.
Oh my word!
The average debt. So this is a mega church.
That's
so
like more than some people put on their house when they buy it.
Yeah, so we're talking. This is a mega church, so you're talking about a membership of about upwards of 10,000 people.
Mm-hmm.
So the average debt people are carrying is $120,000. This is here in Southern California. So of course, region by region, this average debt number, consumer debt number, is talked about $20,000, right? That's average across the U.S. But when you start talking about some of these metropolitan areas, because the cost of living is so much higher, that even though wages generally are higher, but so does their spending and so does their debt. Everything is higher.
So how do you ever get out of debt if you're 120 in?
Well, you got to pay it off. It's like a mortgage, right?
Yeah, you're
so
right.
The average consumer debt that people in America are carrying is $20,000. The average monthly payment that they pay on that debt is $1,500 a month.
Oh, that adds up quickly.
So let that sink in for a second. Average monthly payment on your debt is $1,500 a month. Now, pause here for a second and think about or look it up for yourself. What is, number one, the total debt that you owe, consumer debt that you owe, and what is the average monthly expenditure on those debts? So you got to total that up. And are you in the $1,500 month club or higher or lower? Where do you fall? And so think about that for a second. That debt, just the average, $1,500 a month. If that's paid off, that's an extra $1,500 a month in your bank account.
That's a lot. Well, when I see $1,500, you know what it makes me think? Like some people are paying $3,000 in rent or more, so that's like half of what they're paying for rent or a mortgage.
Yeah, exactly.
California.
Yeah, in a lot of parts of the country, that's a mortgage. That is a mortgage payment.
Wow.
So $1,500 a month in rent. So think about this as you look at your own debt and how much you're spending monthly on it.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine if that's paid off, and what can you do with that $1,500 a month?
Oh, I could do a lot with that.
Yeah. So let's talk about investing. Like once that's paid off, if you invested just a third of that, $1,500 a month, $500 a month invested at 10% interest for 30 years, that will become a little over $1 million.
Wow.
So 10% interest, for those of you that don't realize that the stock market over its lifetime has averaged just over 10%. So that includes the Great Depression years, the Great Recession years, and yes, even right now things are going a little bit crazy. But the lifetime average for the market has been 10%. So 10% in interest is very realistic. In fact, our average on our accounts and our portfolio is a little bit more than that. It's a little bit north of 11%. So 10% is very doable, very realistic. So if you're again, third of that invested, right? Again,
Yeah, that's not
$1
even
million.
the full amount.
And if some of you, because I've said this before, and some people roll their eyes, $1 million, I'm going to need more than $1 million to retire. And I love this comeback. I love this attitude. Like, I'm going to need more than $1 million. Okay, what's your plan to get to $1 million? Number one.
Yeah.
The average American retires with a net worth of $200,000.
Yeah, how are you going to retire on that? If $1 million's not enough for you to retire
And
on,
I know
how
a
are you going to
lot of
make it on
people that
200?
retired with less than that. Talking about net worth outside the belly of their home. So if so obviously all I have to say is people are able to retire with less than $1 million.
Mm-hmm.
So $1 million will give you a comfortable retirement for most people. And that also
It might
puts you in the
not
top
be
10%.
enough in your mind, but it is a lot to do something with.
Well, yeah, that puts you in the top
I mean,
10% bracket.
it's
As
better
far as
than
net worth.
nothing.
Yeah, it puts you in the top 10% in America. So the net worth, the net worth, the top 10% is over just $1 million and over.
Mm-hmm.
So that puts you in the top 10%. And so, yeah, all that to say is, so this is just a snapshot, just based on this data, that the average American has what it takes to become a millionaire. But we don't want to deal with the very thing that's preventing you from doing that, which is paying off the debt.
Mm-hmm.
And if you've heard me, we've kind of talked about the financial topic before. And when I was graduating from college back in the day, I had $30,000 in debt.
I know. I thought, oh, what did he buy? Did he get all new furniture, a new car, go on an exotic trip somewhere? And when I said, what did you spend it on?
I did go on trips.
Well, I know, but not like what I was thinking. I'm thinking like around the world.
Well, I was a little young then, but it was, trips, ski trips, going out to eat, going to bars, clubbing, just having fun. Basically, that's all it was. I basically just
Entertainment. It was nothing to show for.
Basically threw it down the toilet. Essentially what it was. So $30,000 of debt. It wasn't even school debt. Sad to say, I guess it wasn't even school. Well, it was school related because I was going to college, so I was going to skiing with my buddies. But I was thinking, hey, what if I would have invested half of that, $15,000, instead of spending it and on having fun? If I put half of that and actually invested it, then 30 years later, which would have been last year, it would have been that $15,000 would have been worth a little over $280,000.
Wow.
And at 10% interest, right? This year we calculated because when we were getting ready to do the financial workshop, so
you wanted to remind yourself.
I updated it. Yeah, I updated a year later, and that $15,000 net would be worth now $320,000, I believe.
Wow, what up?
So it's
quite
a big
bit
jump.
more in 1
year.
year.
In 1 year, it's big. It's a big jump.
A lot more.
Oh yeah, it's a big jump. In fact, at 10%, your money doubles every 8 years. And so, I update it because teach myself a lesson. And I think it creates a great visual on the PowerPoint.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Like, what could I have done? So, you don't realize how much you just spend,
mm-hmm.
right? I mean, I didn't have the wealth building mentality back then. So I was just spending and having fun. In fact, let's look at where people's money goes. And so I did some more research, right? The average income in America is just north of $50,000 a year. And that's gross. So that's not take home, that's gross. And the average American spends $300 a month on entertainment, $1,500 a month to their debt, their consumer debt, right? And then they put about this might be a little high, $280 a month into savings. And then $25 a month, the average on giving donations. And so you look at this number and it just cracks me up. Like, it's just like, look, this is, your money's going to entertainment, and that debt of $1,500 a month is probably paying back a lot of the entertainment because they're spending more than they actually have the cash to pay for.
Well, and then if you're giving $25 a month, that comes out to $300 a year. So 1 month of entertainment, you're spending $300, and it takes you a whole year to get that same amount to donations.
A good cause. Yeah. And even just paying yourself to invest into yourself.
Oh yeah.
Right. So you're not even, that's the money on entertainment and the debt payment is way more. When you total those up, $1,800 a month is way more than you're even paying yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So think about that. $1,800 a month on just paying for stuff and buying stuff, and very little is going to investing into yourself for the future and in giving to good causes.
So do you want to spend all your money now on entertainment and expenses? Or do you want to save some of that so when you retire, you'll have something?
So, during one of the breakouts at our workshop, talking about debt and also about postponing, having delayed gratification, because part of the reason people go into debt is because we're in this microwave society is we want everything now, right? And all the commercials are about buy, and give you even great terms on a loan, sometimes 0% interest for the six months, sometimes the first 12 months, right? Just getting you to buy as opposed to saving and investing. So let's take a car, for example, right? People want to take out a car loan, get a car loan to buy
a brand new
car. And I said, well, why don't you save for it first and then buy the car? Because it'll be cheaper in the long run because you're not paying interest on the loan, right? And then I'll hear this comeback of like, oh, it'll take too long to save. I said, no, it won't. It'll take less time. Because think about this. When you take a loan for a car, you're just saving in reverse. You're buying it now and you're paying off in monthly installments with interest. So the reality is you can save, right? It's just that you don't want to save now. So you're just going to do it backwards. So if you just turn it around, just do your monthly installments to yourself over, so the average car loan is like 5 years. Okay. So to save up for that car would actually probably take you only about 3.5 to 4 years as opposed to 5 years, because you don't have to pay interest, right? So save for 4 years, that monthly installment paid to yourself, even in a short-term CD to collect a little bit of interest along the way. And in 4 years, you'll be able to have the money to buy the car, even if it's brand new, right? New without interest. And you're going to save, you're going to save all that interest, that 6%, 7%, 8% interest on a car loan. But also, as we kind of shared, how we like to buy kind of a car that's about 3 years old.
Yeah, I was going to say, do you really need a new car? I mean, I tell people, you know what? Save up and buy something cash with what you have. You know what? It might be a beater, might not be the most beautiful car, and then keep saving and saving and saving, and then sell that and buy something nicer, and then keep saving and then buy something nicer.
Yeah,
so that you're not in debt and paying all this interest.
Yeah, so in fact, it was actually the first time I met my wife, Kaylee, when we were dating. It was the concept of buying a 3-year-old car, because you're actually in the process of buying your Beamer, right?
I've never owned a new car, you guys, in my life. Seriously. I buy them when they're like 3 years old, and I save up.
Yeah, and I never thought of that because I was in the pharmaceutical industry and I always got a new car every 3 years. So I never knew anything but get a new car. Well, except for when I was in high school, because I had to buy a used car. But in my adult years, my career years, professional career years, I always had a new car. But, it made sense. You're like, yeah, the car depreciates about 30-35% in the first 3 years. And it's still in good shape. And you can find a car with relatively low mileage and still in good shape. Your car, the one we just got for you a few years ago, still had the new car smell, even 3 years old. Had only 25,000 miles on a 3-year-old car, in great shape, had all the bells and whistles in it, but we paid, a fraction of the price. So we probably saved about, I would say, 13, 15, 16, so about $17,000, $18,000 on that car because we bought it 3 years old.
Plus, if we would have made payments, interest.
Well, yeah, that too. Exactly.
And you know what? And I've also had cars that have probably been 10, 15 years old, because that's all I could afford at the time.
Yeah. And so think about all that money you save by, when saving up, delaying gratification, saving up for it, because you're going to be paying for it anyway. So you might also save for it up front and pay less for it because you won't be paying interest. Because basically when you're borrowing, when you're paying something with a loan, like a car loan, you're basically paying 30, 40, 50% premium on that vehicle, because 6% over 5 years, you're basically going to be paying an extra 50%.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, just think about this, right? So, who would ever buy something 50% over asking price?
And then some people just have a revolving payment for their car. Like every 3 years, they get a new one.
Well, it's the lease.
Yeah, and then it just keeps, so it's just ongoing. They don't own anything. It's just continual payment.
I mean, so I remember when I put this, phrased it that way, I said, who would pay 25% more than that retail, the asking price?
Yeah, because when people buy new cars, they're always bragging about how good of a deal they got.
Yeah, because they just go on a loan, and the car dealerships know they make money on the debt.
Right.
Right. So they're giving you a quote unquote deal. But I talked about, who would ever want to pay 25% more of an asking price? And then it's not just cars, but anything you put on the credit card. If you haven't checked your statement lately, you're probably upwards of about 25% interest.
Yeah, check your interest. You'd be surprised, you guys.
And so the minute you pay something with a credit card, because the average person carries that balance, they don't pay it off every month. So they're usually paying it off. It usually takes them about a year or so to pay off that loan, if not longer, right? And you're basically paying an extra 25% on it.
Well, and the statistics shows that if you're paying with a credit card, probably with your phone these days, I don't recall what it is, but you're most likely to spend a lot more money than if you're paying cash for it. Because if it's cash, which I know a lot of people don't carry cash anymore, it's kind of painful. But if it's a card or your phone, it's like, bloop, bloop, oh, that was simple. And you don't think twice about it.
Yeah, so that's where the plastic can be very dangerous, and I've certainly fallen in that trap too. But that's why, Dave Ramsey talks about the envelope, because, hey, you got to know yourself, number one. And if you're going to be you're liable to spend more because everything's on plastic, but you feel the pain more when you're paying by cash, because there's actually something leaving your pocket, right? And you're literally seeing less in your wallet at that point. So there's a psychological impact of paying by cash versus by credit, by plastic. So we're going to end here by talking about, if you haven't heard about how to pay off your debt faster, there is a strategy in which you can pay off your debt faster than you really realize. And it's called the snowball strategy. Dave Ramsey talks about it. Crown Financial Ministries, that we've used at our church, does the same thing. It's basically, you line up your debt from smallest to largest, and you pay the minimum payment on all of the debt except for the smallest amount, which you pay extra onto that smallest debt to accelerate that payment on that small debt. And as soon as that's paid off, you take what you're paying on the smallest debt and you add it to the next bigger debt, right? So that really accelerates the payoff. And I remember doing that for a sister-in-law years ago. And what I thought, I was helping her pay off her debt, and what I thought,
he wasn't giving her money. He was helping with the budgeting.
Yeah, budgeting. Yes, thank you, honey. What I thought was going to take about 3 years or so to pay off her credit card debt, it actually took us about 8 months. I remember, telling her the last check, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, we're done." I was like, now, unfortunately, she went back in debt. So, anyways, I tried, but anyways, I'll just say the snowball effect works because the faster you pay down principal, when you make that extra payment on these credit cards or any loan, and make sure that that extra payment goes to principal, it actually accelerates the payoff because you're paying less in interest at that point. Because the interest on the next statement is always based on the balance, right? So if you put more in principal, it lowers the balance, which means the interest, even though it's the same interest rate, but the dollar amount you're paying interest on is less.
And make sure you tell whoever you're paying that the extra money to, that it goes towards the principal.
Yeah. And so anyways, that's a great little piece of advice. It'll accelerate the payment payoff. You'll be surprised at how fast you can do that. And in fact, I'm going to put in the show notes links to these financial calculators that I had the folks in our workshop do whatever. That'll show you, how to, how much and how fast and how much savings and interest you'll make by adding a little bit extra to your payments. And also how much money you need to invest on a monthly basis based on a certain interest rate over a certain period of time, and how much that's going to equate to 10, 20, 30 years from now. So I'm going to put a series of financial calculators in the show notes to help you show you, how fast you can get your debts paid off if you do it properly, and then how much money it takes to get to $1 million based on your age and your income and how much you're willing to invest and all that.
Yeah, they're fun to play with, and I think it's very encouraging because once you start showing where you can, in the calculator, put extra money down on it, and you're like, oh my gosh, I can get this paid off earlier. And to me, that was exciting.
Yeah. So playing around with that calculators, I mean, yeah, it's really fun to see, especially to see how fast it is. Because first you put in a debt calculator, You pull in all the balances you have and all your different loans. What are you paying in interest in all those? What's your monthly payments? And then the next screen, it'll ask you how much extra do you want to pay on the loan.
Mm-hmm.
And you put $50, $100, whatever, and it'll calculate out based on the snowball strategy is how fast you'll pay out the debts and how much in interest you're going to save in doing that.
And I know people that have gotten extra jobs just to pay off their debt because they wanted to do it sooner.
Yeah.
And then it's pretty exciting, though, getting out of debt. And just think, no matter what happens in the economy, if you're debt free, you'll have a lot more peace about it.
Yeah. So even if you have a pay cut or whatever, I mean, if you pay off that $1,500 a month that you're paying in debt, that's an extra $1,500 a month cushion that you have.
You start building up your savings account.
Building up your savings account, your emergency fund, investing for the future, giving, all those things, all the things you want to do and be talking about doing, you'll be able to do it. So the first thing to do right now is pay off that debt. The sooner you do that, the sooner you're going to create wealth. So thank you for listening. If you please go ahead and share this with another married entrepreneur that should hear this, because the average American, most likely your neighbor, needs to hear this because they're carrying debt. And this is a great way to kind of get them pointed in the right direction. So anyways, go ahead and share this. Please leave a review. We love that, and we appreciate it. We love you, and we'll see you next week. God bless. Thank you for listening to the Thriving in Tandem podcast. Please visit our website, marriedentrepreneur.co, for a variety of free resources to help your marriage and business succeed.
And feel free to leave us a review and share this episode with another married entrepreneur. That would mean so much to us.
See you next week.